Good morning and thank you for watching KTN News. Welcome back to Morning Prime. It is 60 years of Jamhuri of Kenya being a republic. And with that, the president yesterday addressed the nation on several issues. And before we took the break, we were talking on the Hustler Fund, 42 billion shillings amount of money lent to 21 million Hustler Fund borrowers, making it the largest financial inclusion program in the country. That story has been canvassed better on the Standard. That is from page 2 all the way to page 6. If you could just get your copy of the Standard and go through that, it is what is happening there, and has been well elaborated in there. And we in studio with me is Nerima Wako, Executive Director, Siasa Place, and joining us via Zoom is Kevin Osido, Director, County Watch. Now, Kevin, before we went on break, Nerima alluded to the Hustler Fund and how it is out there to help SMEs be able to put up their businesses, be able to create employment opportunities. Now, Kevin, Hustler Fund is 1 year plus a few months old. And with that, we are yet to see the books of accounts, whether we are operating in the negative or we are making profit, how many people have paid it back. I mean, all you've been getting are statements. But where you sit, Kevin, Hustler Fund, is it helping hustlers out there? Is it a fund that we understand, or is it shrouded in mystery?
Dennis, that laughter is supposed to be a response to that question without saying anything or saying many words. But it is that sarcastic because even the work that we do at County Governance Watch, and especially engaging with affirmative action funds, where we help in boosting conversations between these government funds, about 11 plus so of them, with young people and the challenges that the youth face, particularly radicalization, recruitment into violent extremism, and even the local gangs that we see in our country, Kenya. Part of the conversation has been the lack of opportunities, especially jobs, which the youth imagine that government would then be able to give them those jobs. Fact of the matter is that, again, government cannot give you all the jobs, but in their work to be able to put food on the table and meet their dreams, they experiment with certain things. So we try to help them to meet with affirmative action funds, the credit managers, and just what it means to be able to apply for those funds and get it, from registration to meetings, doing constitutions, etc. Every time we have our meetings, the sarcasm in Hustler Fund crops up. You ask in a group of about 8 young people, how many of you here have accessed Hustler Fund? Only one person would raise their hands. And so you make that individual the plot of the game, and you begin to ask, so how did you start? What is it? How is it going? They'll tell you, I only borrowed once and I've never even repaid. Sasa sotano, so saba itanisaidia na nini? We had bishops, religious leaders from one of the counties, about 71 of them, very high-level religious leaders. And I also asked them this same question post the State of the Nation address, which is about a few weeks ago. Only one lady in the room of about 71 religious leaders has tried to access Hustler Fund. So when the president gives us numbers of 7.5 million repeat borrowers with 36 billion shillings as at the State of the Nation, but of course 42 billion as at yesterday, a question that begs is, where is this money? Who has this money that in the conversations we have in the counties, we cannot see them? We tried one time, Dennis, when the president was having an address with the media. It was a national address. And one young man from Kibra said, I sell skin, I wake up early in the morning, I rush to Kikomba, I go buy hides and skins and I sell them, and I've been one of the best stories of Hustler Fund. So we wanted to make him a story, to work with him through the counties to motivate young people. The gentleman refused, and he said, mimi ni hustler na ninasumbuana kila siku. Even the stories that he was telling us on national media you visit where he's working from. There is nothing, Dennis, and I'm saying this without fear of any fear of contradiction, as the president always says. So the question then is, where are these people who are accessing these funds, and where is this money? So it is a good thing, I believe, that the president came up with as a program to be able to help the youth of this country, particularly those whose interest is in business, to be able to access credit and get cheaper loans, of course, in disregard of the competition with the banks. But a lot more work still needs to be done. In September, I think it was during the last State of the Nation address, a few months or so ago, the president told us that Hustler Fund has also introduced a new group savings scheme that has attracted almost 50,000 active groups, and they have benefited up to about 151 million shillings. Dennis, 151 million in some corner of the country, it's money that cannot go unnoticed. Where is this money? Can we see the validation aspects of Hustler Fund also being shared by the parent ministry, by the other fund managers of the other affirmative action funds? Can we see the consistency in the story? Because otherwise, we are going to be disenfranchising young people who would want to go out there and innovate and begin conversations around motivating themselves and rendering the gullibility of accessing Hustler Fund when really it is probably not working. And you know, Nerima Wako works with very many young people. And if Nerima says that she has not had a very close interaction with the Hustler Fund, then who has? Sorry, Nerima, but I'm putting you on the spot. But it really gives you a very close to the home picture of how most good, quote-unquote, young people look at Hustler Fund. Because you try accessing it, what it is, hash. You are kept there waiting for 14 minutes, which is what it did to me. And I just stopped from the day the Hustler Fund was being launched. So some of these things don't work. So government borrowing from Youth Fund, which was launched by the late President Mwai Kibaki, very good fund. Many young people also benefiting. Extreme paramount challenges, including the fact that we cannot tell in a county how many youth have benefited from Youth Fund. I think those are not stories that you want to be speaking about 60 years down the line, especially given the challenges that most young people and also vulnerable groups, including persons living with disability and even women, are facing. Wezo Fund came to the fore, same challenges. 30%, 10 for youth, women, and PWDs, persons with disabilities, access to government procurement opportunities, same challenges. Then you were told, okay, we want to condense all these things into a mechanism called the Biashara Fund. Then ultimately, Hustler Fund was launched. Still confusing, Dennis. So 60 years down the line, even in access to credit, government programs are still confusing, despite the belief, and we know it, that the things that we are doing, there's a way we can be able to do them, particularly if we just stop very, very briefly and think about whether it is adding value, the value chain mechanisms around it, and even linking it to other macro sectors of the economy. For example, we were told in November by KNPS that agriculture is the most promising sector with the highest number of employment opportunities. But how many of us today are investing in agriculture? What is the level of government investment in agriculture? I would be so happy if the president came and told us, by the way, the linkage between Hustler Fund and agriculture, so that we boost young people into agricultural production, is this. And even put rebates that for you to get, for example, as a young person, you have accessed Hustler Fund, we will give you 10 kilos of free fertilizer. So that it is something that is innovative, it is encouraging also to young people, and is also boosting the innovation. The second sector we're told that is the most promising is manufacturing. But why are most of our manufacturing companies closing in this country? They are moving to other places. And then the third one was mining. How many counties out of the 47 have mining facilities inbuilt in them? So if we could be able to just have a conversation around linking sector to sector and access to credit and financing, I think opportunities like Hustler Fund would be very, very encouraging to many young people, and youth would be coming out to really want to share their story. I have also not come across even a single, maybe I'm looking at the wrong channels, I haven't seen a single person saying, I accessed Hustler Fund, this is who I was before, this is who I am after Hustler Fund. Ministry of Information, the people engaging with presidential communications, my good friend Dennis Itumbi, my good friend Hussein Mohammed, we want to see these stories. Where are these stories on Hustler Fund 60 years down the line? Where is the money, Dennis?
Yeah. Kevin, now let's move to the next issue here. It's universal health coverage. And the president in that said 300 shillings is what the vulnerable will pay to access health coverage, down from 500 shillings as the government rolls out new frame to reform healthcare. Now, in any society, you need a healthy population that is able to wake up early in the morning, and when there is blackouts, they're able to have cold showers, and they're able to go to work and deliver. You know, having blackouts in this country has become a common thing, hoping that it will be sorted out because it is painting us negatively. But for us to be able to have a healthy society, we need to have healthcare that is affordable, that is readily available, and to all, not just to some. And the president says 300 shillings is what will be paid. It has gone down from 500 shillings. How is this? First of all, are our healthcare facilities working? The president is making sure that they are. But moving forward, how will these help the basic common wananchi access healthcare that is affordable and that is working?
So it's a good thing that it has gone down, even though 300 is still a little bit high for some individuals, but it's a good thing that it's gone down. And healthcare, again, is something that a system, a fund, a lot of young people are not part of. They do not deliberately pay to be able to be part of a national healthcare fund. And this is for many reasons. One, it's also the understanding of why it's important to have a protection such as this. A lot of young people still, are active, are vibrant, so they still feel that the cases of me being in a situation where I need dire health care, in their minds, is very rare. And I have a different view of it just because of personal experiences and being exposed to non-communicable diseases at a young age, or seeing family members going through that at a young age. So healthcare is very, very important to me. I think that there also needs to be an awareness created for the public. Why is this healthcare important to you? Because even when you go to rural areas, the ones who are in these health facilities is mainly young mothers who have, delivered. And then we also have instances of elderly individuals who need a lot of care, and children below the age of 5. Those are the people statistically who are in most of our healthcare facilities who need support and assistance. So when it comes to young men, you will hardly find them at healthcare facilities. A lot of times, if they feel that something is wrong, they will probably go over the counter, or if they don't go to a pharmacy, they will go to the community specialist and ask, what do I need to take? What herbs do I need to mix to be able to feel better if I'm feeling unwell? And the reason why this backstory is important is a lot of Kenyans do not see the importance of paying this amount of money and why it needs to be a protection for myself. And even just creating that culture of, the president is constantly talking about saving, how Kenyans need to have a saving culture. But I think also in terms of health, we don't have a health culture where even if a young person is to put 20 shillings aside for their health care in a month, that is, equivalent to 600 shillings if you have to put 20 shillings every day aside. But, we do not have these conversations, or they need to have it. Because even our healthcare facilities right now, many of them do not have drugs. They do not have the medicines that are required. There are also cases of sometimes not having a doctor present. And I've seen the ministries, especially in the county, struggling with that. You know, we've seen even the health doctors talking about wanting to go to the streets, yeah. So we've seen a lot of back and forth, up and down within our healthcare, with our nurses, with our doctors. And I think that, one, it's important to have, but two, for many Kenyans, it's about understanding the delivery that it will bring. So if we're to make this contribution, we would make it loyally if we're able to see the service, if we're able to see the drugs in the facilities, if we're able to have access to the doctors, if we're able to see nurses. And I know that there are a lot of CECs who are working round the clock to make sure that there are individuals within these facilities providing this service. But there are still very many challenges in that. So I would say, number one, it's not just a question on resource and access to resource. It's also figuring out the gaps that exist, the loopholes that are there, because there's a lot of mismanagement that occurs, even in regards to the allocation that goes to the counties when it comes to health, because health is devolved. And then number three, the public awareness of the importance of having this fund. A lot of members, especially within the public, citizens, they do not feel that this is a necessity. We're still talking about a country where a lot of women are still giving birth in the house, at home. We're still talking about a community where midwives still play a very critical role in terms of bringing life into the universe. And so they do not go to a health facility for that service. And I've just mentioned to you that the people who are mainly in these facilities are young mothers, children, and elderly people. So if we're able to do those three, then we would be able to see the benefit of having healthcare. But there's also a rise in mental health and depression. And again, this is something that is not recognized in our communities. And the reason there's a rise in that, again, is because it's young people not having access to opportunities. So, you know, as Kevin mentioned, there's a lot of frustration, and there's so many cases of unfortunate suicides that's happening. And a lot of young people are taking away their lives because they feel that they are not playing a role in building their own life. And these are the challenges that I see coming up in regards to health. So it's not just about access to drugs, which is very important. It's also the right expertise within these communities, because we are also seeing that dynamic on the rise. And it's very, very clear. There's been so many statistics that show that when the economy takes a downturn, gender-based violence increases. Yes. So unfortunately, we're going to have a lot more cases in the community of women being battered, of murders, of suicides. That's going to be on the rise. And our facilities do not have enough support to be able to meet the demand of the community.
Kevin, Nerima there has actually given you what to respond to in terms of healthcare now. The president says it will be cheaper for those who are paying 500 shillings for any Kenyan to be able to access healthcare. But how quality is this healthcare? The bottlenecks that we deal with, unavailability of drugs, of personnel, even just in terms of hygiene in our hospitals. So in terms of healthcare, and the president saying that finally we have a solution to that, where are we 60 years later, and what are some of the things that we need to fix, offering solution, contributing to the national building?
Then it's confusing. It is confusing because health is largely devolved. And a number of the issues that the president was addressing to us too yesterday, and indeed he's continuously made attempts to address Kenyans around, particularly when he's talking about the universal health coverage plan. A lot of those measures have to do with county governments. Now, you talk to a number of county governments, the deliberate goodwill to to ensure that health works for county governments and therefore largely for most citizens is not there. So that, for example, you have almost 75% of the health budget from the exchequer still being held by national government. Why can't that money be taken to counties? Hence, the struggle that Nerima is talking about around payment of doctors, availability of consumables in health facilities, drugs, etc. Why can't we have mechanisms where counties can engage with KEMSA directly? Why must there be a conduit between KEMSA, Minister of Health, and county governments? Of course, most of these things are changing, but you imagine the slow pace as if illness, sickness, and disease is waiting for the kind of meandering that we are doing. It is not. So the president, at that very high level, he's talking about his policy, his dream, his vision as a president. But I still want to send it back to him and ask His Excellency the President. We need reports. For example, why has national government failed to remit resources to NHIF? So you tell us that you want to reduce the money from 500 to 300, but there is a place where Kenyans are depositing this money. 2 weeks ago, a friend of mine who works for a health facility actually gave me a phone call because he saw me hosted by Jesse. I think it's last week. And he was saying, Kevin, I wish I knew. You'd have gone and told them that NHIF monies have not been remitted to health facilities. Why is this slow nature of how it is being done? Yet there are agencies, there are mechanisms that are supposed to ensure that that is done within a specific timeline. Why? Because there are Kenyans who have that NHIF card, and that is the mechanism they use to pay for the health care that the health service that they are receiving. So you imagine the individual and family frustrations that people have to go through insofar as financial ruin, destitution. Whenever, anytime someone is sick in our communities or families, the first thing you think about is opening a WhatsApp page. And you want to put Nerima there, you want to put Dennis there, you want to put Charlotte there, and so many of your friends, with the hope that somehow they will get some money and chip in to help you deal with this medical needs. So 60 years down the line, as much as this is one of the 3 major challenges, yes, Nerima mentioned them, disease was one of those biggest challenges. I don't think that we have made very good steps. Yes, we have made steps because if you look at, we've made certain steps, because if you look at, for instance, investment in infrastructure, so building hospitals, building facilities, building, upgrading facilities into referral hospitals. Initially, there was only 1, then they became 2. Now I think we have 5 or 4 referral hospitals across the country. Is that enough for the hospital to be there without doctors and healthcare providers? I don't think so. Is it enough to tell Kenyans that you can go to a health facility and you wait for very long queues for someone who is a doctor and is one doctor for a facility that is seeing almost 2,800 patients per week? So those kind of challenges, therefore, discourage even expectant mothers to walk into health facilities. Yes, government has a lot of additives that it gives us as mechanisms to boost and encourage expectant mothers to deliver in health facility. But what is the value for their time, the value for their money? Imagining and assuming that some of them have to spend a lot of resources on transport. So the question then is a dilemma between your transport to the health facility and the money that you need to go and buy the drug. So again, the question around traditional birth attendance, which the government has really dealt with many years ago again. Hence the promotion around, the conversation around community health promoters, initially community health volunteers. But must the president tell us that they are being paid for them to ensure that healthcare is working in our communities? I don't think so. It needs to be anybody's volition, at anybody's volition, to want to be able to support a sick person. You don't have to make a phone call to some community health promoter who then tells you, lakini pesa yetu serikali haijatuma. So the president yesterday said is thanking and acknowledging county governments who have already made their remissions for community health promoters. But beyond focusing on the money aspect, Dennis, how can we be able to make it as patriotic as any Kenyan to be supportive to the agenda or the plan of community health coverage? It's not happening because we have very many challenges. And Nerima has mentioned some of them, including concerns around human resource, the strikes that we see between doctors, nurses, the attendants in health facilities, among others. Look at the doctor drain in Kenya today. Most of our health professionals are applying to go and work outside the country. So every day you have these companies from the US, from Canada, from England, from wherever, seeking to recruit doctors, nurses, and other healthcare providers to go and get enlisted outside the country. What does that mean to us insofar as the conversation around universal health coverage? So concerned. 60 years down the line, we have made certain strides. Reminds me of Mandera Hospital, for instance, Mandera County Health Hospital that had its first cesarean section in 2015 post-devolution. And that really then takes away the struggle for the women there to want to be referred and travel longer distances to Nairobi for those kind of very important health procedures. But it therefore takes us back to asking ourselves, is it just curative? Is it promotive? Is it preventive? So the president yesterday told us that we are focusing on preventive and promotive healthcare. But what is the level of investment on health education? These days, we don't see as many extension healthcare workers in our communities undertaking public health education. The health action days, like we used to see them many years ago as part of the 60 years of conversations around universal health coverage, we no longer see those kind of investment, where, for instance, the conversations around come and immunize. And then you walk into a school and many community members have been mobilized and they are getting their services at that level.
Yes,
so people are looking for other opportunities as opposed to government investment, and I think it's just laxity in how our government has been able to enhance the universal health coverage plan. How many of us are still going to India for certain chronic diseases and ailments that our family members have and in our communities and Kenyans generally? So the investment in making it cheaper, making health cheaper for Kenyans is a conversation that the president should be giving us as the leader of the nation, and then pushing the people who work with him to ensure that those things are happening. Sadly to note, you find someone stealing money meant for malaria nets, you know. So what does that leave us in the conversation around response to mega health disasters? And so 60 years down the line, again, Dennis, we have made certain strides, certain good steps, but several others are still pulling us back.
Now, it is 31 number of active housing development sites employing 120,000 people. Another 31 are undergoing evaluation, while others are in various stages of design. Nerima, this is all about the housing fund, the housing levy that is out there, and the project that President William Ruto says is out to create opportunities. And we know there is even a case in court right now on this matter, but it's still being implemented, and Kenyans have given their views on the same. When you meet with Kenyans and discuss with them every day on these one with regard to cost of living, what do they say? What do they tell you?
It's a mix. Some of them do feel that housing was not a necessity for now. Health, they care about. Opportunities always comes number one. Health comes second. And then third, now you normally find some people care about housing, some people care about other things. But I think, you know, the president says that this is something that's going to provide opportunities to people. And the major question for many people is, for how long? Yes, it's going to create opportunities for them to be able to build these particular buildings or housing and structures, but then for how long? Once they're done with the building, what happens to these young workers is a question for many young people. But also, housing is important for some individuals, especially even when you look at Nairobi. Majority housing within the slum areas is places that are subpar. People shouldn't be living in those structures. They are not healthy. Community members are exposed to running sewer lines which are open, and they're just things that it shouldn't be humane. It shouldn't be permitted as to how some people are living within our city. Even access to water, a lot of people do not have access to water in our city, majority of people. And even when you go to rural areas, again, people still fetch water, and even access to that water is difficult. Clean drinking water is difficult, which goes back to the issue on health, which the president was talking about, on preventative. So when it comes to housing, I'm afraid of a bubble where there are individuals who, one, when it comes to affordable housing, we've seen a lot of people leaving particular housing that they can afford housing, and because of the economic situation, they're choosing to live in smaller housing or moving areas in terms of what they can afford. The concern that I have is that this housing is supposed to be for a certain group of people who might not be able to build their own housing. But we might find that the people who can afford to build their own housing are the ones who end up living in that housing. And so it would be the criteria for people being able to move into that housing is going to be key. And are we meeting that criteria, or are we going to be building housing for individuals who do not necessarily have a need for housing is going to be important. And then the other area that I'm thinking through is, even when we talk about housing, for instance, it's also within the Constitution in terms of access to water, access to health. Housing is also there. And so there was a huge debate whether government is supposed to provide that housing, or is it there in terms of having private entities and creating the conducive environment for them to build that affordable housing. So we're talking about private-public partnership in terms of, you know, government partnering with private entities to be able to do that. So there's this sense of ownership. Who owns those houses? You know, because as much as people are saying it's government housing, we've seen housing from, you know, we're talking about Kenya 60 years on, housing that belonged to public officials right now. We've seen how, you know, some of it has been sold to private individuals, and we have people now utilizing those spaces, which are in very strategic areas in our city, to make a profit out of it. So is this going to be an issue 60 years from now, looking at public housing and how public housing has become now an avenue, a resource for revenue for people who are now in government? And so how can we stop that from happening the next 60 years is something that I am concerned about. So I do think we do need housing, but there are still a lot of questions around whether, you know, me as a person who is taxed to pay that housing, and how am I contributing to that? That hasn't been answered. So people feel that if there was that whole debate of, yes, if you contribute, that housing is going to belong to you, then they removed that clause to basically say not necessarily, but it is your duty to pay that tax. So people are unhappy about paying the housing levy. And even for us in the office, it has meant a lot in terms of our salary at the end of the month. A lot is deducted, but also it's something that we're able to see, you know, so at least we're seeing the buildings going up. But again, hoping that we can get better details in terms of how much resource has been utilized. Where has that material come from? Hopefully we're using Kenyan-made, Kenyan-owned material. Hopefully we're also supporting Kenyan-run businesses. Hopefully it's not just, you know, watu wa mjengo. We're also supporting other collar jobs to be able to put up this housing. So the whole ecosystem of how this is supporting the Kenyan economy hasn't been particularly clear. And it's something that, again, in terms of information, we haven't gotten access to. But I do think there are other industries that need a lot more of a oomph and a boost rather than housing, including manufacturing. We've seen a lot of, or some resource going into some companies that have grappled and struggling in terms of even sugar. But I think we need to invest more there, because even within those industries, we can create opportunities for products that Kenyans need every day. With housing, once the house goes up, now we'll be paying rent and it ends there. But then when we look at products, I think that the government can definitely invest more in manufacturing, and in manufacturing locally is where a lot of the opportunity still remains.
Kevin, I come to you on housing. Right now, you're calling us. When I was talking to you yesterday, you said nilisafiri kwenda ushago. Now, in terms of these affordable housing getting to all the counties out there, have you seen any developments where you come from, where you are right now? And also in terms of government priorities, is housing a priority at this time when we are battling on issues to do with education? There is healthcare. We also struggling to revive our manufacturing sector. I mean, with the president saying that 120,000 people have been employed and matters to do with housing, where do you sit, Kevin?
Dennis, I am confused. And do you know why I am confused?
Tell me.
This housing issue was quite a big concern during the first biennial conference, or the first biennial devolution conference. And a question that counties and in fact even governors in that conversation were asking was, where does the housing project leave county governments? Because housing is devolved. Urban development by Constitution of Kenya is devolved, where, for instance, national government through the ministry is supposed to only help in coming up with policies and legislations, and then counties through the assemblies are supposed to enact similar legal mechanisms. It is county governments that are supposed to provide land for these housing projects that we see. Now, it really behoves conversations, because you don't see a lot of drama like you see in other projects, especially between the president and the governors, and even directors, chief officers, CECs of housing and urban development in counties. The only people you see there are MPs. It is members of National Assembly that hang around the president when he's launching these housing projects in county governments. Now, that is a big question, and that is why during the devolution conference, the conversation was, where does this leave us insofar as the letter and spirit of implementing and fast-tracking devolution? The second issue that is a big concern, and I think that the president during his next address needs to address this concern, which projects are Jubilee housing projects? And which projects are Kenya Kwanza housing projects out of the 33 active housing development sites that are going on, and the 31 that he's talking about undergoing evaluation, and then the rest? It therefore means that if you take 33 and 31, it gives you 61. So each county is supposed to help us, Dennis, respond to the question you're asking me, whether I have seen a housing project going on in my county. I will tell you yes and no. Yes, because it is somewhere in Uganda, close to the governor's place. Where I come from, where I am, is in Larieda, which is over 40-something kilometers. What is the mechanism of helping young people in a county to benefit from the housing projects, especially given opportunities? The government has not told us whether it means that there is a rebate so that you have a good tabulation of how many sub-counties are in a county. And if it is a housing project in a county government, how many youth should come from how many sub-counties to be seconded to that facility? Because then the issue around discrimination, disenfranchisation, among other employment-related or opportunity-related concerns, therefore crop up. The third issue, in my view, is, has there been a deliberate conversation between housing firms in Kenya, like Housing Fund Corporation, Housing Finance Corporation, and mortgage facilities in Kenya, against employers who even have mortgaging facilities in their employment contexts? Which is why, going back to the question about happiness, and Rima has also alluded to this, most Kenyans are not happy about it. And I remember when the conversation on housing project was coming up, people were asking, nani alikuambia tunataka nyumba? Because again, once we get the response between Jubilee housing projects, then we evaluate who are the actual people living in those houses. Are they the most deserving, or are they just people who know someone in government and have helped them to get those housing? Because I'll tell you, Dennis, there is also a hashtag that someone who is interested in these housing projects is supposed to key in their phone. I have tried keying in the same challenge. We will get back to you. We will get back to you. We will get back to you. And I was telling my wife, how do we now deal with these people who will get back to us? And we attempted to write a letter, which I then discarded because I was like, okay, how many Kenyans therefore will have the privilege of writing letters and submitting them for systems which are not working, other than just continuously paying your rent or running to the village and staying in the village, or So Kenyans are uncomfortable with the number of things that government is doing. Hence the conversation again, Dennis, about the priority. In the 3 countries that the president was telling us about yesterday, Singapore, Malaysia, and I think it was some other country there. Their priorities were not like ours. Of course, this is for Singapore, Malaysia is 40 years ago. Our case is 60 years now. But for instance, they began with education. If you look at their histories, you watch their YouTube videos about their national development programs, their Vision 2030s, because they also have Vision 2030, which they're actually achieving. Education was their priority. Of course, we already dealt with the issue of education earlier on. Then they went to health. We've just talked about the issue of health. And then housing, so that you have people who are educated, they are also healthy, and then you begin to look at how they meet certain basic human requirements like health, like housing, Article 43 of the Constitution. But in our case, it looks as if either our government's priorities are lopsided, but indeed, Dennis, they are bottom up, because it is the bottom coming up, without necessarily special regard to the feelings on the ground and people, what mostly people are talking about. And their agendas that, largely speaking, a lot of times may not be seeking to address some of the fundamental challenges like employment. So, Nerema asked a very good question. How many local firms are supplying inputs into the projects?
And I hear you, Kevin. I hear you, Kevin, on that, but let me talk to Nerima here in terms of, as a republic, it is 60 years later as Kenyans, in terms of us just playing our role in also just helping the government in achieving its deliverables, because they also have their own KPIs, which is through their manifesto that they said they would deliver. What must we do to also be citizens championing the government agenda?
I believe it's one, information. I do think that there's a lot happening, that we do not necessarily have the adequate amount of information as citizens. So there are institutions such as mine, Siasa Place, County Governance Watch with Kevin, that work around public participation. There are even some umbrellas such as Okoa Uchumi that focus on the economy. There are some that focus on health. I think that there are areas that citizens who are interested can get involved more, even at the grassroots level, and demand for more in terms of information, because we have that in our constitutional right, before we get to a place of simply attacking. I think that there are some areas that are working, but we might not necessarily know. And then there are areas that are not working well, that we can input the information that we have to support that they work well. And then secondly, also, it's our leadership. I believe that we have some representatives, again, who are not working for the best interest of the people, and to just watch them. You know, we can see how they can be very passionate about an issue. We have seen with CDF, they actually refused to go on break, you know, to make sure that this is something that is dealt with before the holiday break. So we can see where they can rise up and raise issues and refuse to adjourn because a matter hasn't been concluded on. So they have that backbone, but they choose their interests onto where they are going to be interested in engaging. So also to observe that, especially in moments where people felt that representatives were very silent on particular issues. So to note, when are they silent and when are they active? And then once they are active, when it comes to CDF, you know, looking at our schools, for instance, we've seen tuition actually increasing for some institutions and highlighting those institutions because there are some principals and headmasters and mistresses who are actually just rogue and increasing prices in terms of uniforms, activities, reams of paper, you know, blaming it or using an excuse of CBC in terms of increasing this amount. So I think the Kenyan people do not have a lot of this information. There are entities that are working around to get access to this information, so coordinating that information. And I normally encourage, especially youth, to involve themselves in areas that they are passionate about. So for many, for instance, maybe it would be access to the internet. We've had over and over the promises of having Wi-Fi hotspots in all the wards, 1,450. How many has CS Owalo launched, including in areas that are close to Kevin at the moment? How many of them are actually working? These are some of the studies that we have done, and we can tell you right now confidently that about 50% of those Wi-Fi hotspots actually work. And so there are communities around these areas that can highlight these particular issues, make things work. Because even in the paper today, I've seen that, you know, the committee has called the CSs on energy to ask, you know, why we had a power blackout on Sunday. So we're seeing that there are committees that are trying to work, but they do need the people to also push and put pressure underneath them to have answers. We do need to question people who are sitting in positions of power, who have been put there to serve us, and, you know, question whether they are doing the work that they should be doing. So I do believe that there are some who are working, there are others who do need to get out, and so we cannot throw the baby with the bathwater. I don't think so.
Nerima Wako from Siasa Place Executive Director, Siasa Place, and Kevin Osido, Executive Director, County Governance Watch, are joining us this morning on Morning Prime, bringing sense on just the president's speech yesterday, Kenya at 60, handling issues to do with the state of economy. We've talked about 21 million Hustler Fund borrowers, education in the country. We've also handled healthcare, the vulnerable to pay 300 shillings from the previous 500 shillings, and the fact that the president says affordable housing is creating opportunities for young people. But Nerima asking, after the houses, then what next? That has been our conversation this morning. Kenya at 60, taking stock of the president's speech. Asante sana Nerima for creating time, and Kevin Osido, who has been joining us via Zoom link digitally, because you say nowadays COVID-19 opened opportunities we never thought existed. And it is on that note that Morning Prime comes to a close. My name is Dennis Aseto. News Diary will be coming to you in a few. Enjoy the rest of your viewing and